All right. We are live streaming. Now, I am going to share my screen. Actually, let's just say the bracha. Baruch atah
Adonai
Elohim melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah.
Torah. Okay. Now, let me share my screen. Make all of you bigger. Am I the only teacher who does it this way by sharing a screen with text, or does Rabbi Vogel do the same thing?
Same thing.
That's it. That's it.
Okay. So where are we in this week's Torah portion, Vayishlach? So to catch everybody up, Jacob has just spent the last couple of decades living with his father-in-law, Lavan, having lots and lots of children, 13 children, in fact, 12 boys and 1 daughter. And he is left Lavan's house. That was not an easy thing. That was the end of last week's Torah portion. And in this week's Torah portion, we find him face to face with the confrontation that he has long avoided, reconnecting with his brother Esau. Now, do you remember how Esau felt when Jacob left 20 some odd years ago? Was it a gracious, beautiful, tearful goodbye?
Not exactly.
Not exactly. It was
Murderous.
that's right. I'm going to kill my brother. So Jacob hears that his brother is coming to see him. And how is Lavan coming to Jacob? What does Jacob know about the way Lavan is coming?
He's not coming happily because Jacob left. He believes that Jacob and his wives and his property are all his. So he's upset with Jacob for leaving without telling him.
Good. Okay, so we have to make the assumption, as Kathleen said, that Jacob still remembers Esau's desire to kill him. And therefore, he has to, imagine that Esau is looking for blood and revenge. And he knows this as well because Esau's coming with a retinue of soldiers, his entire army, and his military chief of staff. That's who Esau is bringing with him. So if you were Jacob and you heard that an entire army of your brothers is coming, bearing down on you, how do you feel if you are Jacob?
Fearful, distressed.
Exactly, which leads us to our very first text. So everybody can see? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Vayira Yaakov me'od. What does that mean? Jacob was very, very afraid, exceedingly afraid. Me'od. Vayetzer lo. And he was distressed. He divided the people with him and the flocks and the herds and the camels into 2 camps. So I don't want you to go down to the text yet. I don't want you to look at the commentary, but I just want you to look at the verse itself, particularly the part that is bolded. And I want you to think about what's going on there and how might the Torah have written it differently. And the fact that the Torah wrote it this way, what might it be stressing? What might it be telling us?
I think he focused more on emotion than his thoughts about it. I mean, he's not thinking about, his own part and why Esau was feeling this way at an intellectual level. He's not thinking that he's going to be forgiven,
Good.
or even that he should be forgiven.
Okay, so first thing is what Kathleen said. What we're feeling is Jacob's deep emotions here. We're not getting into his mind about how guilty he might be or responsible he might should feel for the situation that he left his brother. All we feel is this emotional, this overwhelming emotional sense of Jacob. Good. What else? Is there any? Yeah, Anita.
I'm looking at the fact that there are two items, afraid and distressed.
Ah, wonderful.
And afraid is, as Kathleen said, it's visceral, it's heart, it's you're just totally afraid. But distressed might be more in the mind. It might be that he regrets some of it. So I see that as maybe two things.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you for pointing that out. It is significant, I believe, as Anita has pointed out, that the text adds the word was distressed. Because it could have just ended with Jacob became exceedingly afraid. He divided the people with him and the flocks and the herds and the camels into two camps. The fact that it adds that word distressed, I think, invites us to question the whole idea behind fear. Like when you're afraid, each one of you, when you have fear, when you are afraid, what does that often lead to? What's the next step after fear, Kathleen?
Precipitous action. And, I was thinking.
Wait, don't rush on that. Hold on to that. Say that again.
Precipitous action.
Precipitous action. For some people, like Kathleen, fear leads to very specific behaviors to follow. Keep going.
And I think I read a commentary once that said that the distress was because he did, even though all of this was going on, he was distressed that he might have to kill him or that he could injure him, and it might not be fully necessary. So he was afraid that Esau would kill him, but also distressed that he might kill in return or injure in a fatal way when it wasn't truly necessary.
Okay, so that commentary points out to something that is very common when we become afraid. What happens in our mind when we face a fear? Oftentimes, right, what do?
Flee.
Say that again, Steve.
Flee.
We run. That's exactly one possible scenario, is to run away from whatever it is. We don't want to confront it.
Fight or flight.
Right, fight or flight. That's true. Good. What else?
Paralysis.
Paralysis. Excellent. Lauren?
You face your fear. You face your fear.
Okay. The best scenario in the situation would be to face our fear. But what is Jacob doing is not facing his fear. In fact, what he's doing is he's overly engaging in that fear. The midrash that Kathleen just offered is that he is magnifying that fear, and he is creating even greater anxiety within him by turning and turning over and living in that fear instead of either fighting, fleeing, or any of those other things that you mentioned. Right. And I do think that is very common in human nature. When we are afraid, our minds get the better of us. And we start ruminating on things that we probably shouldn't be ruminating on. And we make the situation much worse than it has to be. Right? I mean, is that a yes? that sometimes we make our fears take hold of us in ways that cause us enormous emotional distress. Stan.
Well, I was gonna say that you can either be defensive in nature or offensive in nature. And this is, it seems to me, he's doing kind of both. He's being defensive and dividing the forces around it and whatever, but offensive in his approach to saying, what he's gonna do.
Okay, so and imagine if the text was Jacob became exceedingly afraid, full stop. Therefore, he acted wisely. He divided the people with him and the flock and herds and camels into two camps. But it doesn't say that. First, it says, and he was distressed. And in that moment of distress, right, he allows the fear to get the better of him. Then, Stan, you're right. Afterwards, he steps back from his distress and he takes action. But only after he has put himself in such a tizzy that he didn't necessarily need to put himself into. And again, I think that's human nature. I think we often feel the fear, put ourselves into a tizzy, and then only afterwards can step out of that in order to be able to do the things that we need to do in order to take care of lessening the fear. Lauren?
They, I lived my life catastrophizing everything, Like if Mark was late coming home from work, I immediately thought, he's in a car accident, something terrible happened. But not everybody lives their life that way. I mean, some people never go there. It's like, so I think you say it's human nature, but it's not everybody's human nature. Some people never put their, it's like, they never think that. And I remember once they said, you really, yes, that's where my mind immediately goes. The worst case scenario is going to happen.
Lauren, thank you for saying that. That is such an important point. That is exactly what Jacob is doing here. He's catastrophizing and it's not helpful. But and was it helpful for you, by the way?
Of course not. I had to talk myself out of it and think, well, no, let's start to worry when there's something to worry about.
Exactly. Let's worry when there's something to worry about. Maybe Esau's coming from another battle, and that's why he has his army with him. Maybe there's lots of reasons that might be without Jacob necessarily having to feel this deep-seated fear. Mort.
Yeah, this is the second time up until now we're confronted with siblings. We have, and from the Garden of Eden, Cain and Abel. Now we have two brothers again confronting each other and concerned about violence. Well, why did God allow this situation to arise? Why not sit down with Jacob and Esau and say, listen, this is our plan, and you're going to go your way, and and you're both going to be successful?
Well, Mort, that would be a wonderful, wonderful thing. God, the therapist.
But
however, Mort.
But wasn't it his plan? In other words, it was God's plan that Jacob would be the successor to and founder of Judaism, and not. So God had this plan. Why did he allow the conflict to arise the way it did? I don't think that. I don't think he acted very nicely.
Okay, I don't necessarily agree with you, Kathleen. Are you responding? Because I see Steve's hands up. Are you responding directly to Mort's question?
Yeah.
Steve, were you going to respond directly to Mort?
No,
So Steve,
I have an observation about Jacob.
Okay, are you okay with holding off for 1 second until we take?
Sure.
Okay, Kathleen, go ahead and respond to Mort.
I think perhaps God is teaching us that these are the problems that we're going to have to solve in life. and that we're not always going to have someone else to intervene and take care of it, and we have to learn how to do it. And he gives us these examples so that we see all the different types of responses that people can have and the types of solution they come up with, because although God had already told him he was going to protect him, it took action by Jacob, and he took 3 actions. He prayed, he tried to appease him with gifts, and he prepared for battle. So he's teaching us that we have a lot of alternatives and that we have to be responsible if we're co-partnering with God and making the world better.
How does that work for you, Mort?
I think if that's the purpose, then it works for me. But then that excludes God being a God.
Well, no, it
then
doesn't.
if that's
No.
your approach, then what you're looking at is a philosophical lesson in how human beings should react, independent of whether there's a God or not a God. If you believe that God intervenes, then you have to ask yourself, why would a God who intervenes allow this situation to arise?
Okay, so it's hard to, I don't believe that God intervenes. I don't think, even though we have these stories in the Bible with God intervening, I believe, as Kathleen said, they are more parables. They are lessons for us because they are universal in the way in which they are expressed. It could be very easy for the Bible to be non-narrative and just state brothers and sisters must get along with each other. There should be no jealousy ever felt. Parents should treat all children the same. Now, the Bible can say that, but the reality, Mort, is that just isn't going to happen. And therefore, there's a story that's indicative of the natural way in which human beings deal with one another. And it is for us to wrestle with these universally difficult moments with siblings, with parents, with children. And if we wait for God to intervene, then we've missed the entire project of what the Bible is all about. Because the Bible is about a way of God providing to us the tools that we human beings need to figure out how to make life better for ourselves, and not wait for God to step in and do it for us. Because if God stepped in and did it for us, then what's the point of us being free? What's the point of us getting out of the Garden of Eden? What's the point of God giving us free will? And so, as Kathleen said, this is here as a metaphor, as a parable, as a meta story to teach us, what do we do in situations where we have fear, where we have to confront our siblings when we've done things that we feel shameful about? How do we reconcile? How do we live with jealousies and parents loving us in different ways? That's what these stories are about. All right, now we'll go to Steve and then Stan.
When I study the Torah, and I think about the characters, this character is one of our patriarchs. He's a great leader. This is a man who should be very smart. He might be distressed at a moment, but so I think about that. And so to me, to focus too much on this few words, exceedingly afraid and distressed, okay, that happens to everybody. But when you're a great man and a great leader and a patriarch of the Jewish people, we expect the right set of decisions.
Now, Steve, here, does it always happen? Do our patriarchs always make the right decisions?
No.
Exactly. And to me, that's what's the beauty of our tradition, is that we don't have perfect patriarchs and matriarchs. We have patriarchs and matriarchs who are flawed, who struggle with the very things that we humans constantly find ourselves struggling with. Stan.
I think that what you said was significant, and that the Bible is a combination of stories and laws, and mainly stories, because that's the way that we as human beings see things and learn from, is by stories. And it's a storyteller. We have rules, but mainly we learn from these stories. And the right question is never, did this happen? The question is, why is it written the way it is? Why is the story told the way it is? And that's what you're asking.
That's right. And what does it have to teach us? Thank you, Stan. Kathleen.
I wanted to go back to what you said about free choice and to Mort's question about why God would allow it. If God intervened, he would be like a codependent parent who always rescues, and the child never learns responsibility because the parent has never let the child accept any consequences for his actions. And God allows us to learn from our behavior so that we can do better, so that we can return, so that we can even think more clearly about our options. Because if we don't learn to think about our options. We just think, it's no big deal. Dad's always there. God's always there.
Great. I love that. Mort, how does that sit with you?
I agree with everything that's said, and that's why I draw the conclusion that the presence of God is irrelevant to the lessons that we are learning, because they're parables and they have nothing to do whether a God exists or not. The story will remain the same, and the lesson will remain the same.
Kathleen, how do you respond to Mort?
Because if we don't have a higher value like God in our life against which to compare, and the laws against which to compare our behaviors, we're going to select another God. It might be our ambition, it might be our desire for luxury, it might be our desire for love or lust or money or whatever. But if we don't have God as the higher weight by which to kind of compare where we're going to end up with a self-centered perspective. And self-interest is going to rule because God's not in the picture. So we have to have God in order to reach that higher goal. Otherwise, it's going to be self-centered and power conflicts ultimately. Your self-interest is going to compete with mine, and we're just going to have war all the time, or conflict.
Couldn't have said it better. Could not have said it better, Lauren.
I don't think parents read the Bible when it comes to rearing children, especially twins. As a school teacher, I had several twins come through my classroom, or they were in one classroom, and it was so clear which twin was favored by the mother, just in little subtle ways. I mean, we as teachers would see it, and if we saw it, how did the twin that was not favored feel it? You know? And it was just the way they would talk, or the way they talk about the one twin, or the way they talk to the other twin. Now they're all grown adults. I don't know what's happened to them as they've gone out into the world, but it was clear how they treated the one against, especially if they were boy and girl twins. Then it was like a whole different story. But it was, I don't think they read the Bible and said, oh, well, this is how Rebecca was treating her twins. Where's God in that? It's just nature that takes over.
Yeah, no, very good. Thank you. All right, let's see what the commentators say. We haven't gotten very far today in the study sheet, but so we have the Tiferet Yehonatan, the Jose of Lublin, and he makes two different comments. So let's take a look at the first comment. Jacob was anxious and worried regarding the sense of fear and weak-heartedness that settled in him. He reasoned, sinners in Zion are frightened. A God-fearer who is whole, in other words, sinless, fears nothing. So This first comment is trying to give us a little bit of rationale to where Jacob's fear comes from. And what is he saying here, Tiferet Yonatan? What is the root of Jacob's fear? Yeah, Rob.
Guilt, that he feels guilty for being a sinner as he was in the past, and that's where he said, if I hadn't done any wrong, I wouldn't have any reason to be fearful, but I did, and so now I'm afraid because of what I did.
Beautiful. Okay, so guilt is what motivates the fear. Knowing that he did something wrong might lead him to believe that there are going to be consequences. He may have ignored those consequences potentially for the last 20 years, but now facing it, he realizes justice comes. And when justice comes, he has a right to be afraid. So, generalizing that statement, right, we might say that if we think we can get away with wrongdoing and live a life free of fear of consequences, we're fooling ourselves. Even 20 years later, immediately, Jacob returns to the moment in which he sinned. So you can only imagine then how that has plagued him over these decades. In other words, leading us to say, if we live our life free of sin, then there's much less we have to be afraid of. What do you think about that? Yeah, Kathleen.
Well, that's great, and I think that's true. But I'm thinking about why he did what he did, and it's because his father loved Esau more, and he was jealous and wanted his brother's birthright and his brother's blessing. That led him to an action that he now feels guilty.
For sure. I don't want to take away. This is what Lauren just said, right? Lauren gave us the example of parents who she saw acting differently towards their kids.
Yeah.
In other words, saying that parents are just human, right? We react to children based upon all sorts of things going on in our own lives. This child reminds me of my mother, who I lost as a young, person, and therefore I have a certain affinity towards her, versus this one who reminds me of my father, who beat the crap out of me, and therefore I have a certain affinity towards him. I mean, we can't help but bring our own psychological stuff with us into the way we are with our kids. And so Isaac and Rebecca do that with their children.
And the love divides them. Love which is supposed to be the cure. Love divides them. And so the only way they can correct it, right, is to treat them fairly, maybe.
And yet, how many times have I said to somebody sitting in my office who comes in and says, my parents were terrible to me? That may be, but you're an adult and you have to figure things out for yourself. And you can't sit and blame the actions of somebody else for the choices that you've now made in your life.
Absolutely.
Be responsible, grow up, own your mistakes.
Yeah.
And so whether or not, Jacob fell into this because his parents did this to us is secondary. What, Tiferet Yohanatan is saying is, Jacob, it's time to meet your maker, right? It's time to grow up and face the music for the things that you have done that you should not have done, regardless of whether mommy made you do it or not.
Absolutely.
Stan.
Well, I think it's interesting. We write stories and we write them and say people do things because I did this because. The Bible doesn't do that. It says this is what happened and leaves the because to us to figure out, and that's what we're doing.
That's nice. Very nice. Okay, so the first text is clear. Rob helped us understand it. When we make mistakes, when we live with sin, there is a tendency for our fears and anxiety to be greater than if we live a life of absolute purity. Now, could any of us live a life of absolute purity? Of course not. So therefore, do we all live with a certain amount of fear and anxiety? Yes, we do. Period. Okay, that's his first comment. Second comment. Jacob became exceedingly afraid. He was afraid of Esau. Immediately upon sensing that fear, he was distressed that he had been frightened. After all, God had promised, I will protect you wherever you go. What a fascinating rereading of this text. What is he doing in this second comment? How is he rereading what we've just analyzed for the last half hour?
It's explaining the distress in a different way. It's
Totally.
explaining,
Where is where now, according to this text, does his distress lie?
that he hadn't trusted God enough to know that he would protect him.
That he, in the moment of his fear, forgot God.
Mm-hmm.
What his distress is not over, oh my God, what am I going to do? My brother is fast approaching. He's going to kill me. That's not his distress. His distress is, oh my God, I can't believe for a moment I was afraid. God offered me God's protection. What do I need to be afraid of? His distress was over his lack of faith in that moment. In other words, to translate this out, we feel more distress when we lose sight of the fact that we're going to be okay. That whatever it is that we are fearful of is going to pass. That we have internally and externally the gifts that we need to manage our fears. Whether that's faith in God, trust in ourself, belief in the goodness of humanity, strong familial support, whatever it is, fill in the blank. Don't waste your time and energy on stress and anxiety and fear. Instead, replace it with trust and faith. Does that make sense? Lauren, you're going to want to say
Well, I was
something?
going to say, was he more afraid of Esau, or was more afraid of himself having to admit to his sins and ask for forgiveness?
It
Because
doesn't, I mean,
that seems to be harder to do.
I think it's both. In the first text, it is, in the first commentary, it is, I'm afraid of having to face my past and what I did and the consequences of those behaviors. In the second one, Lauren, it's, why do I need to be afraid of Esau? My life is not going to be endangered because God already promised to protect me. So one is a fear related to the emotional well-being, and the other one is the fear related to the physical well-being.
Don't you think that's why siblings end up never getting together, because saying I'm sorry are the two hardest words that they have to do, they have to say.
I don't think it's just siblings. I think in any relationship, I'm sorry are hard words. Right? What's the very first story in the Bible where we realize that I'm sorry is a very difficult thing to say? Who's the first human being to be confronted by having done something wrong?
Adam.
Exactly. As Linda says, right? Adam eats from the fruit of the tree. God asks him, did you eat from the fruit of the tree? And where was Adam when, he heard God? He ran and he hid. He didn't want to say, I'm sorry. And he doesn't say, I'm sorry. He says, the woman that you gave me, she made me do it. Right? So Adam
Like any good
blames God and the woman, but doesn't say, I'm sorry, I ate from the fruit of the tree. All right, let's continue. So, one who trusts in God need not fear any human being. This is in response to this second passage. Fear demonstrates that one's trust is not complete, as in the verse. What ails you that you fear man who must die, mortals who fare like grass? You have forgotten Adonai, your maker. Should this not apply all the more so to Jacob, who received a direct promise from God and therefore had no reason to fear? Now, God only performs miracles that are beyond the norms of nature for those who trust in God with all their hearts. Once Jacob realized that he feared Esau, he became anxious. The limit of his trust caused him anxiety, for he reasoned that he was not worthy of miracles. Thereupon, he set out to prepare for natural outcomes with military preparedness. He divided the people, the flocks, and the herds into two camps. So what do you think about this comment? Right, the first one, simple. Fear comes from a lack of faith and trust. Okay, that's the first comment. The second comment is God only performs miracles that are beyond the norms of nature for those who trust in God with all their hearts. What do you think about that? Yeah, Rob.
I think when I read this, I think back to what Mort said earlier about God being the relevance of God here. Before, as for example, you said before you don't believe that God acts in the world, but here it's saying God does act in the world, but only for those who trust God in their hearts. There's a seeming unfairness about that because we're all a little bit skeptical. There are very few people who totally believe, trust in God, because we see really good people who have bad things happen. This goes back to the theodicy question, bad things happening to good people. It doesn't jibe with what we experience in the world.
Okay, I'm so glad you said it. So can I frame it this way, Rob and everybody else? What about if we read this verse as saying, God only performs miracles that are beyond the norms of nature for those who believe in God, meaning that those who believe in God see the miraculous in all things. I have a friend who lost her son when he was 19 years old to brain cancer. Right before he died, I had the privilege of ordaining her, presenting her for ordination as a rabbi. She, since his death, has seen and experienced and felt his presence in the most mundane, ordinary kinds of things. A license plate driving by on a car that says something, right? A shadow in the airport when she walks around the corner, whatever. What matters in her mind is not that, she's waiting for these miracles to happen, but that she's open to life in a way that she's able to see the miraculous in the ordinary, because she has such a strong faith in God. Her husband, since his son died, has not stepped foot into the synagogue. Completely lost his faith in God. Lost his faith in, he's Jewish because his wife, he wants to stay married to this incredible woman. but it's not from anything of his own. Two people, the same exact thing happened to them, the same horrific tragedy, and yet they walk through the world completely differently. One has absolute 100% faith in God, which doesn't mean, Rob, that she isn't challenged over and over again by that faith, but not enough to lose it. And the other one who lost it completely. She sees miracles. He says, you're full of crap every time she gives another example. Who's right? They're both right, right? They both are true in the way in which they experience. Stan. Wait, hold on, Stan. Does that work, Rob? Does that?
Yes, yes, that's perfect. That's just beautiful. Thank you.
Stan.
Well, I think we all have our own image or belief in God in whatever way. When we've been looking at it as God helps those that have miracles or have a certain way of life. There's another way of looking at it as God helps those who help themselves. And that is more of a ordinary way of life, and a way of saying that I'm responsible.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, if you take a look at the questions that are posed here for us to think about, look at question number 2. What is a miracle beyond the norms of nature? How do you understand miracles? Are they only beyond nature, or can they take place by means of natural events and interactions? If the latter is possible, how might you recognize them? How have you experienced this sort of miracle? Right? It's not the splitting of the Red Sea miracle. It's I was running late. I knew I was going to miss my appointment, and all of a sudden, a parking spot opened up right in front of me that I slid into in order to get to where I needed to be at the right time. Or whatever. I mean, I don't know why that's the one that popped up into my head. How do we view the miracles? The first question, is it possible never to fear? This is what, Rob, you said earlier. Of course not. We're going to fear. Can we control that response, though? And what can these teachings offer us as a way to respond to the arising fear, such that we need not fear also having lost touch with the truth of the moment? Can we somehow discover the endless capacity that each of us has to hold on to the divine in moments when we feel most afraid? Right? That's the challenge this text presents. Every one of us has faced, will face moments, right, where our faith is tested. Can we not allow ourselves to fall into distress in those moments? Can we not? What did you say, Lauren, before?
Catastrophize.
Exactly. Can we not catastrophize in those moments? George, you've been awfully quiet today, George.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me or not?
Loud and clear.
Good. I read somewhere a comment that Jacob refers to the physical being, and Israel, his new name, refers to spiritual matters. So this is a physical human matter, not a spiritual situation.
I love that, George, because one of the beautiful things about the patriarch Jacob is he holds on to both names throughout the rest of his life. Abraham, moved from Avram to Abraham, Sarai to Sarah. Jacob goes back and forth. That's why we're the children of Jacob in Yisrael, because there are times when we're locked into our physicality, our materiality, our humanness, our animal instincts. And there are times when we move to the Yisrael, to the wrestling, to the spiritual, to that beyond the physical. That's really nice. Thank you. In fact, in a sense, George, it,
That's in the art scroll, commenting from Rambam. Okay, not me.
even so, you brought it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if you look at question number 3, what miracles can one turn to God for, and what is required of us to bring about such miracles? How is God present even in these miracles? How do we elevate in our own lives the miraculous in our daily behaviors? Yeah, hi, Nancy.
I think that, I think of things like that, and if somebody's dying in the hospital, and they either pull through or they don't, and that's when you get tested of your faith in God.
For sure. Absolutely. You know what I thought you were going to say, Nancy? I thought you were going to say, I see the miracles when I come to the synagogue with Rabbi Mendelson once a month and cook a meal for Second Nurture.
I'm there volunteering on, I do with the kids and stuff once a month.
Exactly. That's the miraculous, Nancy, that you take time out of your life to give in such a magnificent way to these children, because what you're saying to them is, I could look at life differently. I was abandoned, I was adopted, I was fostered, nobody loves me, nobody cares for me. All of a sudden, here is Nancy every month saying to this child, you matter, you're important, you are the image of God. Nancy, that is miraculous, right? That is the miracle for that child.
And what is
You
she-
just feel so bad, your heart goes out to them,
And that's why you come every month. Lauren, what were you going to ask?
said, what does she do? That sounds very
You're
inspirational.
welcome. Anybody can do it. Every month, we take care of a group of families who are fostering children. And Rabbi Mendelson has volunteers who make lunch for the families and the kids, and volunteers who hang out with the kids, help do homework and whatever else, while the parents are meeting with social workers to help them manage this process.
Do you believe in coincidences, or do you think they're miracles?
Yes.
Okay. So we went to pay a shiva call yesterday to Barry Geyer's family, and Barry Geyer was Michael's coach all through his youth, and Michael used to get up to bat crying, and Mark and I used to pretend that he was an orphan. We didn't want to pretend that we were his parents. And Michael said, I'm never going to have my kid play baseball. It's too traumatic. Lo and behold, many years passed. Michael's son played baseball, and Michael ended up being a coach. And he was a very loving coach and very kind coach because of the lessons that Barry taught him. Lo and behold, 2 seconds later, in comes Corey Stock, who we didn't even know knew the Geyer family, who Michael coached with. And it was like, it's like, we didn't
Exactly.
know. And they coached together. And there he is. It was like, I just finished telling the story. In comes Corey, and Corey said, yes, Michael was the most patient. I was the crazy coach, and Michael was the calm, patient coach.
There you go.
And
you can call that a coincidence. I would like to call that a miracle.
Yeah.
It's up to you. All right, we don't have a lot of time, but let's take a look at one more verse in this week's Torah portion. So now Jacob already met with Esau. They've connected, right? They've connected. And Jacob says, Kachna et birachti, except, I love this, birachti, in other words, or birchati, excuse me. What is the birchati? The firstborn, the gift, the very thing that Jacob stole from Esau, he is now giving it back to him. He says, let me present my gift, which I have brought to you. Ki chaneni Elohim v'ki yesh li kol. For God has favored me, and I have everything. I have all that I need. Now, I just realized forgot to give you the second verse.
Yeah.
Right afterwards, Esau says, no, 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 you don't have to give me because yesh li rav, I have plenty. We see that in the commentary below. So there's two comments. Jacob says, take this from me because God has given me everything. And Esau says, no, 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 I don't want to take it because I have a lot.
Mm.
And the Katav Sofer is going to call out the difference between I have everything versus I have a lot. He says, Jacob said, for God has favored me and I have all that I need. But Esau said, I have plenty. My father, the Khatam Sofer, used to say, the wicked are never satisfied. And that is why Esau said, I have plenty, and not, I have all that I need. But Jacob said, I have all that I need because he was able to be satisfied with what God had favored him. I would add, wealth that comes to one by means of luck, mazal, can never satisfy. Human nature is to ask for more. A lover of money never has his fill, as it says in Ecclesiastes. But that which comes to us from God arrives with the midah of satisfaction as well, so that we are able to rest easily with what we have and not cast about seeking more. This is in Jacob's voice, for God has favored me. This did not come to me by luck. Therefore, I have all that I need, and I am not constrained from giving. It was God's blessing that made me wealthy, and I have all that I need. Remember, Jacob worked for 20 years. He was a hardworking shepherd to gain what he got, but he attributes his hard work to God. And when he attributes it to God, he can say, I have what I have. What do you think about this difference? Yes, Kathleen.
I think it's a major transformation of him from Jacob to the name of Israel. It's a major transformation in his character. Because when he was growing up, he didn't think he had all that he should have, or that even he had plenty. Otherwise, he wouldn't have tried to get the birthright. This is a major transformation of his character to say, I'm okay now. I have all that I need. I didn't think so then, but now I do. It was like his finding that God was in his place. He hadn't realized it before, and then he realized it. And now he's having a second realization. Yes, I do have all I need. I think that's just a delightful character change.
Indeed. Thank you. Stan, were you going to say something before? No. So some thought questions for all of us. Is luck the outcome of our actions? When we think that we are the ones who are planning, devising, and making things happen? Is luck winning the lottery? Is it the receipt of charity or a bequest or a gift? Is that which God provides the outcome of our regular devoted work done for the sake of heaven? Do you ever think about the work that you did, right? The labor that you engaged in throughout your life, was that labor connected, and the gifts that you got from it, the rewards that you got from it, was that ever in your mind connected to God providing? George.
Yeah, well, again, we're supposed to think that, we get what we're provided for, we're supposed to have. But on the other hand, there's a paradox because there's a mazel, which is the stars, mazel tov, he's got mazel, mean he's got luck.
So which is it for you, George? Is it mostly mazel, or is it mostly God provided you based upon the work that you did?
Well, I like to think it's my skill, efforts, etc. But but there's like, looking back, there's things that happened, along the way, which kind of set things up.
So maybe we can say
You know?
this. How
You
about
know
if
what
we,
I'm saying?
yeah, how about if we say it, take somebody like LeBron James. Do all of you know who LeBron James is?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So LeBron James is probably one of the greatest basketball players
yeah,
of all
okay.
time, right? Michael Jordan,
Right.
Kobe Bryant. Now,
Whatever, yeah, yeah,
LeBron James had mazel to
yeah,
be given the gift of height and the skill of basketball.
yeah, yeah,
But he didn't stop with that.
yeah,
LeBron James works
yeah,
unbelievably hard and has dedicated his life to taking the mazel that he received
yeah,
and turning it into
yeah,
the best of the best,
yeah.
right? So therefore, George, it's not an either or, it's a combination of taking the
But
mazel.
there's no, but along the way, there might have been certain failures which turned out to be really good, which went from path A to path B, which was a better way.
Yeah, failure
know.
is exactly. We all know that failure is, I mean,
Not
mistake.
always, sometimes gives you information or
Ex-
you get something,
exactly.
it comes out better. Not always, of course. I don't recommend it, always, because we all have our ups and downs, but sometimes it works out.
Absolutely. I see a bunch of hands. So Stan, Nancy, and Rob.
I think the luck we have is to have been born who we are. None of us chose anything about being born, and yet we're blessed, first of all, to be born in this time and this place instead of thousands of years ago with all that we would have had to do. And, if we think of that as luck, but actually it's a miracle.
That's beautiful. I love that. Okay, who was it? It was after Nancy. I think you were next.
Okay, yes, luck is winning the lottery. That has nothing to do with how hard you work or not. But getting back to LeBron James, he and a lot of other sports figures give back to the community with their work with children and special capacities and stuff. They give back.
So
But
in other words, they take their mazel, they turn it into hard work,
Yeah.
and then they pay it forward to those who don't have the blessings that they had.
exactly.
Very
And you-
nice.
But then you take someone like Kobe Bryant, who had the skill and then went up in a helicopter on a cloudy day. Where did his luck take him?
Well, again, I mean, yes, that's true. But was that his fault or was that the pilot's fault who shouldn't have been flying
Yeah.
the helicopter in the
Somebody's
first place?
fault that
Right? It's the pilot's job to say to Kobe Bryant, no, you may be a great basketball player, but you're not a great pilot. I'm a great pilot. And as a pilot, my job is to make sure that it's safe to fly. Period. End of story. Okay, who is next? Rob and then Mort.
Yeah, I was just going to say I once heard on a Dodgers broadcast Vin Scully quoting Branch Rickey, who was a famous baseball executive, and the quotation was, "Luck is the residue of design."
I like that.
That's
Now,
beautiful.
Whose design, of course, usually it's the person who gets the luck, but can be, you could also argue that he was talking about God. It was a very interesting quotation.
That's beautiful. Luck is the residue of
Design.
I'm going to write that down. Luck is the residue of design. And that was Branch
Rickey, R-I-C-K.
Yeah. Ricky.
I think he was general manager of the Dodgers at one time back in the 40s and 50s.
Thank you for that. All right, last comment. Mort, you're going to take us
Yeah.
for
Well, when I was a young man, somebody told me, gave me advice, and said, "Success is a matter of luck. Ask any failure."
I like that one too.
What a great way to end. Well, as always, I love learning with all of you. Thank you so much. I will be gone for a couple weeks in Africa, but
Wonderful trip.
but I'll be back the first week of January, and I think I'm teaching January 2nd. So
Well, have a safe trip and
Safe
Yeah, it's
a good
Yes.
one.
Yeah,
Try to
for
fly the
sure.
plane.
thank you all, and I'll see some of you this Shabbat. Take care.
Bye-bye.